You want me to let him in?
Yes, please, thanks.
She's at fault for getting the green light for our daily meeting.
Hello, welcome to New Teacher Seminar.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you all join us. Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. We had quite a few people go ahead and register for this event. I know that this will definitely bring a lot of really heated and interesting conversations. So we're excited to go ahead and put this out there and really get some perspectives from other teachers, educators, administrators within our district on this really important topic. So as we're letting everybody in, I want to remind you to go ahead and mute yourself as you're coming in if you're not muted already. And then if you're not muted, you'll want to go ahead and do that. Make sure your video is sharing if you're able to have it sharing, because we definitely want this to be a personable experience. But, you know, we know that what's great about this is that you get an opportunity to interact from anywhere. You could be cooking dinner, you could be driving home, hopefully not showing your video then, just listening. But it's exciting to be able to give you an opportunity to interact with us instead of showing up somewhere. So one of the positive perks of all the changes that we've been experiencing. So if you're just coming in and this is possibly your first time interacting with us on a teacher engagement event, I am Jessica Solano. I am the teacher engagement leader here at Polk County Public Schools, and we're excited to have you joining us. I oversee the recruitment and teacher engagement office, and you probably get plenty of teacher engagement emails from us. Our focus really is to support teachers, to help with teacher leadership, and also to boost district culture. So we have part of programs like teacher engagement ambassadors, new teacher seminars, leading from the classroom, extending excellence, affinity groups, and so much more. We also have a podcast coming out, which we'll make sure to advertise multiple times, especially at the end, called the Ignite Project. So that's coming out, and I think next week on the 30th. So we're excited for that. But I want to go ahead and introduce my team in case you haven't met them yet. I got Mallory Williamson, who's co-hosting tonight, and Tamika Thompson as well. And they are the other piece of our teacher engagement triad. So Mallory, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi guys, my name is Mallory Williamson, and I am one of the newest additions to teacher engagement. I actually see some of my old colleagues or previous colleagues. I shouldn't say old because that's how I get into trouble. But I have been teaching with Polk County Public Schools for 10 years. 9 of those were in 5th grade at Wendell Watson Elementary. So I'm so honored and excited to be a part of teacher engagement, and I'm really excited to be able to co-host my very first new teacher seminar. So I'm going to pass it off to our other teammate, Tamika Thompson.
Thank you so much, Mallory. Tamika Thompson here, Teacher Engagement Coordinator with Polk County Public Schools for about 15 years, most of that as a secondary science teacher. I've been with Teacher Engagement for nearly 2 years, and so excited to be able to greet you all and welcome you to the New Teacher Seminars. You are really in for a treat tonight. I say almost every time we have an event, New Teacher Seminar or otherwise, this is one of my favorites. And I'm not lying, like they're all my favorites. So I'm so excited for you all that you'll be able to hear some information that you'll be able to implement and take back to your classroom tomorrow. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, thank you, Tamika. So again, just want to say one more time, if you are not muted, make sure you go ahead and mute yourself. That way we cannot pick you up on here. This is on Facebook Live, which is a really neat way to be able to hit a broader audience. Tamika and I and our team were able to do this in March when we actually were planning on having, ironically, a session on instructional technology. And so when we went to distance learning, of course, we couldn't meet as a group like we normally would. And so when we did it online, we decided to do the Facebook Live feature, and we got over 1,200 views on this one video. So we're super excited to be able to have that opportunity to continue that on this year. I also want to go ahead into our next piece of recognizing our sponsor, because a lot of what we do is really meant to both build the capacity of our teachers, but also treat you like professionals, the professionals that you are. Had this been a normal face-to-face event, we do always provide dinner. There's usually giveaways, all these awesome things that we really are only able to do because we have excellent business partners like David Vonte at Equitable Retirement Advisors. So we're really Equitable Retirement Advisors. I had it right. I had my notes. So we're really excited to have them join us. He does have some giveaways in store, so make sure you're paying attention to that. And he also has some really exciting information that really will help you in the long run, especially with planning for retirement. So David, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you before we get started on our event.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. I'm going to share my screen, Jessica. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you guys see this?
Yep, we can.
Looks
I
good.
feel like this is a meme, right? Can you see can you hear me, right? It's always wrong.
That's right.
This day and age. But for everybody out there, my name is David Vonte. I'm from AXA, or Equitable Retirement Advisors, rather. We help you guys with your retirement benefits through the state and the county. That's going to be the FRS and Polk County schools. You can see on your screen here, if I'm going to talk a little bit over the next couple minutes about how we can add value, how we might be able to help. But separate from that, it's separate from your retirement benefits. We're also giving away some Amazon gift cards. So if you can see there's 2 phone numbers here, 2 emails. All you got to do is send a text to either one of those phone numbers, email to either one of those emails.
Looks like maybe
You win the Amazon raffle. That's because we're giving away some gift cards. And if you want to set an appointment to learn a little bit more about your own personal retirement benefits. So again, that's where we partner with the school board. Like Jessica says, usually this would be in Jim Miles, or this would be at an event hall, and we'd have food for you guys and we'd go over this in person. But as new teachers, you guys are now FRS employees, right? So some of you might be coming from another career. Some of you might be coming from, whether it's another county, another district, another employer, whatever. You guys are going to want to learn a little bit more about your FRS retirement. So that's in the FRS, that's your state plan. That's going to be your pension plan or the investment plan. So as FRS employees, you guys have a retirement option through the state of Florida where you have to pick whether it's the pension plan or the investment plan. Now, everyone always asks, which one should I pick? I don't like to paint with a broad stroke, but you got to decide one of those as soon as you get hired if you are a new hire. One is going to be a monthly check for the rest of your life. One is going to be a lump sum. So it just depends on kind of what's going on with your family situation. In terms of making that election and figuring out what makes the most sense for you, we can help you with that. Separate from the state of Florida benefit, the FRS, which is the pension and the investment plan, we also help you guys with your Polk County 401k or your 403b. This is usually where I ask everyone to raise their hand if they've heard of that, but we can't do that here, so we'll just, right? Just getting used to this virtual stuff. But anyway, essentially, your 403b is your 401k through Polk County schools, right? So this is if you want to save a little bit more for retirement, we can help you with that. Going over those options. If maybe you have an old IRA, an old 401k, or an old 403b, we can help consolidate what we call, those are orphaned accounts. So if you need some help, maybe with some old accounts you got hanging out there, we can help you with that as well. And then again, just kind of pivoting that into a holistic financial planning, which is what we do, right? We are experts in your FRS state benefits and experts in your Polk County benefits. So again, if you want to enter to win the raffle, or you want to learn more about your retirement benefits, I'd argue the retirement benefits are a little more important than Amazon gift card, but I understand Amazon, right? Everybody loves Amazon. It's funny. I used to do like a JC Penney or a Macy's giveaway, but it's Polk County and people would yell at me that it was too far away. So we just went on the internet. So we're just doing Amazon now. So we're just doing Amazon gift cards. But yeah, so if you see this stuff on your screen here, text the number, again, either one. Or email, and we'll reach out to either make you a winner for the gift card or learn a little bit more about your retirement benefits, whether it's the FRS, which is your state plan, or the Polk County one, which is your 403b, or like I said, you maybe have an old account for us to review and consolidate. So again, my name's David. My partner's name is Matt. We're going to try to be on these throughout the year. I appreciate Jessica reaching out. We love to partner. We live to serve our Polk County people. So I appreciate the opportunity. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the session. Thanks again.
Thanks, David. We appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and capture your information and put it in the chat. So anyone else who's wanting to get into that Amazon gift card raffle and get in contact with you, they'll have your information there too. We really appreciate the partnership.
Send it back to you.
Perfect. All right, Mallory, go ahead and bring us back up. So one thing that makes these new teacher seminars unique is that we love to give out these surprise awards called Polk Schools Proud Awards. We do a little bit of detective work, and we try to get some information on some people that are coming and really get to shout them out for a real quick minute publicly, because we know recognition goes a long way. So we're going to start off, we'll read out what was said either by an administrator, a coach, a colleague about this person, and then we'll say, surprise, say who it is. And then if you are one of these people who's called out, you can expect to get a framed certificate and these remarks sent to you through courier to your school. All right, let's get started. All right, so this first one is from Shannon Brown, who's the principal at Davenport Elementary. And she says about this teacher has been such a resource to the e-learning teachers. She jumped right in to help get the platform set up. She lends a helping hand to her second grade counterpart, and she is rocking and rolling. We appreciate that. And that person is, drum roll, Marjorie Rivera. Congratulations, Marjorie. We know it takes a lot to go ahead and lend a helping hand right now when everyone is so overwhelmed. So we appreciate you, Marjorie. Be on the lookout for that certificate coming your way.
All right, so the next one that we have is this teacher is diving right into the self-contained ESE life with her face-to-face students and her e-learning. She has taken on grades 3 through 5, even though she was hired for K through 2. She's such a team player and a great addition to our family. This is also from Davenport Elementary, and our next winner is, I hope it's Liza. I could be pronouncing that incorrectly. But we are so excited for you, Liza, and congratulations. This is an amazing award because you're doing an incredible job.
Nice job. 2 from Davenport Elementary. All right, so this one's from Polk City Elementary from Jennifer Herb Hancock, the principal there, saying that this teacher has really hit the ground running. She's a team player, and she's definitely here for the kids. That is Samantha Boatner. Nice job, Samantha. Way to hit the ground running.
All right, so this teacher has jumped right in and learned Schoology like a pro. She has such a positive attitude when she approaches a challenge, and she asks questions when she needs help and doesn't stop until she finds the answer. That sounds like my kind of teacher. She communicates with her parents each week by doing a very detailed parent newsletter stating the expectations and what the students will be learning the following week. So this teacher is coming to us from Sand Hill Elementary. Lauren Sloan, congratulations.
Yay, one of our new teachers, awesome. All right, this next one's from Horizons Elementary. Oh, I used to work there. This teacher always has a smile on her face and is quite eager to learn new educational practices from her team and academic coaches. She is a great listener and is always striving to improve her educational skills. As a teacher, she's flexible and willing to help out any way that she can on campus. They are so fortunate to have her as a Horizons Hawk. That is so sweet. Who is it?
Emily
Libby.
I just saw
Nice
her make a
job.
comment.
I know, you didn't even know. you were getting the
Congratulations,
award.
Emily. All right, next up, this teacher has definitely hit the ground running. He has used his creativity to help us do a commercial for our workforce academies. In addition, as yearbook advisor, he handled school picture day like a pro. We are thrilled he's a minor, and we are excited how he's going to build our business department. Da, 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 da. Jacob, congratulations.
Love it. Awesome. So from Doris Sanders Learning Center, Polly Bruno, the principal there, says that this teacher is absolutely amazing. He began with making his room a calm, safe, and secure environment. You walk into the room and it's like entering an underwater environment, I think is what needs to go there. It is so calm. He has flexible seating for every student and even has a canoe in the corner for a sensory calming area. In addition to his room, his instructional strategies are amazing. We have drawn from his experiences from unique learning, and he's our key person for assisting all other teachers. He also took the lead to use the iPads in the classroom. Just amazing. I love it. I'm so happy he's part of the DSLC family. This is, I got an idea, Manus Gonzalez.
Yeah.
I knew it. He's fantastic.
rocking it. All right, this is coming from Ridge Technical Academy. This teacher is a dedicated, caring teacher who keeps her students engaged in learning and preparing her high school students for the health science field. Arlene Plog, congratulations.
Yay.
I know she's in here. I saw her in here.
I saw her too.
Whoop, whoop.
All right, from Haines City Senior, we have saying that this teacher came to us from another high school this year and did not miss a beat through that transition. It is quite a transition changing schools, I will say. She's treated all of her students with the kindness and compassion that you want and need from a school counselor. She makes all of her deadlines and has an extremely relaxed demeanor that puts her students and coworkers at ease when engaged in conversations or simply in her company. She's also thorough with her work, making sure to follow up with parents, students, and administration to ensure all I's are dotted and T's are crossed in regards to paperwork and scheduling. We're lucky to have her and embrace her here at Hornet Nation. It is, it's a school counselor, Lakeisha Staten. Nice job. And I want to address real quick. Someone asked, is this just for new teachers? It's for everybody.
Nope.
Any Polk County Public Schools employee who wants to join in, welcome.
All right, Ryan Van, who is a principal at Lake Gibson Senior, has this to say. This teacher has hit the ground running as a new teacher. There's a lot of teachers who have hit the ground running. I feel like sometimes you just hit the ground, but they're hitting the ground running. She's building relationships with students, always collaborating and planning with other teachers. She is a super friendly team player that always has a smile and is willing to do whatever it takes to support our school. She works wonderfully with struggling students. I have no doubt she will be an awesome teacher for years to come. Elizabeth Massey.
Yay! From Haines City Senior, this teacher is doing a phenomenal job for us. She's organized, builds relationships with students, has good rapport with colleagues around her, and has created a great learning environment for her students. Can already tell she's going to be a tremendous asset to this school. I love it. Stephanie Swanson. Nice job, Stephanie.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well done. Well done. We love getting those little compliments so we can just shout you out. Everyone needs their moment in the spotlight. So we love getting that opportunity to be able to do that for you. Hopefully you'll continue to join back in with us, and you never know when your name is going to show up on there. So we know that you all are eager to get started on the diversity panel that we talked about. We've really been kind of mulling this over for a while and trying to think about how best to bring this topic out to the public, especially to our teachers and our educators. And so we're really excited to be able to partner with Chandra Hall, who's our Director of Diversity and Equity, as she facilitates this panel. And we thought it'd be really powerful to get perspectives from an administrator, from a school counselor, from teachers, even a brand new teacher or a teacher in their second year, to be able to say, hey, I know that sometimes we focus on instruction and standards and all these other things, which are extremely important, but there's also this equally important piece in addressing a culturally responsive classroom. So we're excited to have these ladies join us today. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll just say your name, and that way the audience can see you. If you'll just go ahead and give us like a 30-second background on you as far as your work history or experience either in or outside of Polk County Public Schools. So we'll start off with Chandra, our Director of Diversity and Equity. Chandra, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chandra Hall. I am the Director of Equity and Diversity Management. This is my second year in the role, and I'm having a wonderful time doing trainings, working with the community, and just really focusing on making sure we have attention on equity and diversity in our district. I have about 27 years in the district. 8 of those years was as a teacher. I've taught middle school, high school, and elementary school. I have also been an administrator in multiple grade levels, and of course worked at the district level. And I feel like all of these experiences do give me a great lens to look through as I'm speaking about these topics. And I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Wanda Aponte, who's the principal at Loftman Oaks Elementary. Wanda, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Of course. Good afternoon. My name is Wanda Aponte. I am a New York transplant, been living here in the beautiful Polk County for 16 years. I've been working here at Loftman Oaks for about that same amount of time. I started here, my roots are here. I started as a paraprofessional and worked my way up to the principal, have been a principal now for 8 years, assistant principal for 2 years, 7 years I was an ESE teacher. And I hope to be able to, I guess, provide some light about the diversity in this county that I have experienced, especially in the Northeast area, the growth and the amount of diverse students that we serve here, and be able to give you some insight, some little drop of knowledge if necessary, and answer whatever questions you may have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Wanda. I didn't know that you had started as a para. That's so cool.
I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So when I moved here, I used to be a hospital administrator for 20 years in New York. So when I came here, I said, let me do this. I'm the daughter of a former teacher and principal. So I really believe it's in the blood a lot of times. And as much as I fought it, I just took to it like fish to water, and I can't see myself doing anything else.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Very cool. All right, next up we have Felicia Jackson, who's the school counselor at Harrison School of the Arts. Felicia, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I want to make sure that you guys can hear me because I've been having trouble with my microphone. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. Really
okay,
clear.
Great. Well, my name is Felicia Jackson, and I've been with Polk County Schools for almost 30 years and a few months. It would make my 30th year. I taught for 8 years, and I've been a school counselor for 22 years. I've done middle school and high school. I've been at Bartow High School. I worked there, and I was a teacher there and a counselor there. And then I went to Lawton Charles Middle School, and now I'm at Harrison School for the Arts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we have Jessica Gilbert, who's a teacher at Stevens Elementary and also currently serving as their teacher engagement ambassador in our pilot program. Jessica, go ahead.
My name is Jessica Gilbert, and when I returned to Polk County from Tallahassee, I started as a substitute teacher at a few different schools around the county. And then I graduated with elementary education, but I taught 8th grade intensive reading to begin with. And then I went from 8th to 2nd, and I've been there, and this will be my 8th year teaching. And I'm just super excited to help and talk about diversity.
Thank you, Jessica. We appreciate it. And then finally, we have Diana Ortiz. She's also a teacher at Stevens Elementary, and she is in her 2nd year teaching, also hitting the ground running. I like that, not just hitting the ground. Diana, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Diana Ortiz. I don't have a long background like everyone else that you just heard. So like Jessica just said, this is my 2nd year teaching, and both years I've taught kindergarten, and that's it.
I love it. And she was also a major leader at Polk State College with their education group, which is where we got to interact with her first. Awesome. All right, ladies. So we're excited to have this panel go ahead and kick off. Chandra's going to facilitate the questions, and we're all going to eagerly watch and hear your perspectives. It's really powerful to get to hear that we have people from all different perspectives here with administration and school counselor and now teachers. So hopefully the questions that we ask today will really help and be relevant to the situations that you're working with in your classroom. You know, the chat is live, so please feel completely free to go ahead and type in questions as you have them in the chat. We will have a Q&A session after the panel is through, so make sure that you get some questions ready so that way you can go ahead and ask them. You can even direct them specifically to a panelist. I do also want to mention before I let you go and have Chandra start, we are, like we said, on Facebook Live. So if you're on Facebook and you see this and you want to share it so that others can see it too, we welcome you to go ahead and share. As far as what Facebook is seeing, we're only seeing the speakers and the screen. So don't worry about if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on Facebook Live. You're not. If your view is showing a gallery view, that's your view. Our view is just showing our speakers and the presentation. So with no further ado, Chandra, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Before I start with the questions, I kind of want to frame some of the topics that we'll be speaking about this evening, and hopefully try to give you a little snippet of a definition of those. Culturally responsive teaching and cultural competence are topics that we'll be discussing. And culturally responsive teaching is basically a research-based approach, making sure that we connect what the students already know, pair it with what we're teaching them in the classroom so that they can organize their thoughts and grow as a student. Cultural competence is just being aware and learning about different backgrounds. When you get into speaking about diversity and equity in the classroom, it's just what it says. You know, diversity is understanding that we all come from different backgrounds, and there are so many attributes that we bring to the table based on the groups that we are affiliated with. And then equity in the classroom is also another topic that we'll talk about, as well as the school district. And there's a difference between equity and equality. I wish I had something to put up on the screen for you, but equity, when you're speaking of equity, you're making sure that everyone have what they need in order to be successful. And equality is just making sure everyone gets the same thing. So sameness is equality, equity is fairness. When we get into its biases, there are implicit biases and explicit biases. One is intentional and one is in the unconscious. And then cultural sensitivity and inclusion has to do with being sensitive to our diversity that's in our district and our classrooms, and making sure that everyone feels included. So those are just some definition of terms. I like to frame those because it's difficult to have these conversations when we do not understand what some of the terms mean. Okay, so starting with our first question for the panel. Diversity, again, it's all the ways that we are alike or different from one another. The first question for our panel is, how can you ensure that equity, diversity, and sensitivity is present in your classroom? And we're talking about both academically and socially. So how can you ensure that there's equity, diversity, and sensitivity in your classroom?
I can go ahead and start that question. When I'm in my classroom, I like the students to understand that we all are different, and we can say, I respectfully agree or disagree, but we all have our own opinions, and we can prove our answers and we can show that. And I just wanted to add on when Chandra said that equity means equal, or I'm sorry, remember that equity does not mean equal. So one student may need a few extra minutes of instruction to master a concept, while the next student may need even more time to grasp and develop an understanding. It is not about how much time each child gets, but rather how to create appropriate time and availability for each student.
Thank you, Jessica, for that perfect example of equity in our classroom. By the way, EPC 4A ties directly to this, all of these topics. So if you're a classroom teacher, this is something that that you're evaluated on or observed, I would say, when you are in your classroom. Okay, thank you, Ms. Jessica. Anyone else? And if I may add to that, when we're thinking on a broader scale, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic and we have students at home doing virtual or e-learning. So when you look through the lens of equity and equality, all students got devices to take home with them, right? But not all of our students have the same opportunities at home. For example, there might be a parent in one home with the laptop or the device working side by side with their students. And when we go to looking at other scenarios, some students may not have or be afforded, mom is working possibly. So when you talk about equity in terms of a broader base, there, some might say, oh, we gave everybody a laptop, everybody's equal. But is there equity there? No. So a lot of times schools, and they've been great about this, a lot of schools have reached out to me, but adding extra layers to make sure that each of those students that are at home have equitable access to being successful in the e-learning models. So anyone else want to speak on that? Or are there any questions out there? Okay, so the next topic, equity and social injustice is the next topic. So the question is, with recent racial and social injustice being publicized more frequently, how could you address the topic if the subject is broached in your classroom or in your school? And then what are some resources that what are some resources that might be used to help you address those topics? Does anybody want to speak on that?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, I sure can. With the recent racial and social injustice being publicized more frequently, how could you address the topic if it was broached in your classroom or in your school?
I guess I could speak on that one. So as far as like kindergarten, like I could speak for kindergarten, like I think it's important to listen to your students, get to know like what they know about what's going on, and kind of listen to where they're going in that direction. As for like resources, I like to pull in a lot of books, like diversity books and things like that. There's a lot of great books out there that you can do read alouds and have that conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. And Ms. Ortiz used to be a teacher at my school, and I do remember kindergarten has a unit on community helpers. So that's another great opportunity just to talk to the little ones, especially about, or not just the little ones, the older ones too, about community and understanding that everyone deserves the same rights and human rights and privileges and loving one another. So those are very good examples. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Okay, are we still talking about equity? Because I was having a little technical difficulty.
That's okay. We're talking about equity, but we specifically asked about how would you approach the conversation if it was brought up in your school about the social injustices and racial injustices?
Wow, that we can be on here forever about that. There's so much information and misinformation out there that I think the first thing we need to do is decipher what is accurate, what is factual, and how appropriate it is for, you know, whether it's the children, the parents. It's about knowing your audience, about creating that safe space at your school where these hard conversations can be had. Because a lot of people, in order not to offend, you know, folk, they just say, oh, I'd rather not discuss it. Well, to me, that's just as bad as saying something that's completely outrageous, putting some fake news out there. Right. So it's something that you learn because, you know, you get better at it the more you do it, right. But you have to tread very carefully and always understand that with kindness, a lot of information can come across and not have people with hurt feelings and come to a consensus. My experience has been in my school. When I first started working here, our Hispanic population was maybe like 18%. I was one of 3 Hispanic teachers. And in the last, like I said, 15 years, it's completely just gone full circle. Our population is like 70% Hispanic at this point. I've been very adamant about creating a staff that reflects the student body, because then it is much easier to have these conversations. And it's not easy. As a teacher, I remember coming into a classroom of 20 SLD kids, and My most challenging kid was a kid who loved wrestling. I hate wrestling. I hate all that WWA stuff. I'm not a fan. But in order for me to be able to connect, and it's about the connections, every Monday I had to watch WWE SmackDown so I could be ready to have a 10-minute conversation with him on Tuesday to make sure my rest of the week was okay. And it is about knowing your students, knowing your audience, trying to find that hook. And a lot of times it's about sports. A lot of times it's about games, Fortnite. Oh my God, what am I going to do with these little, elementary and
Right.
boys with their Fortnite? Even though I found out a lot of girls play Fortnite too. So
Yeah.
again, that was a bias I had. I thought only boys liked it. Girls, and they're really good players as well.
Yep.
So those hard conversations are easier to establish them with kids, staff, when you find that common denominator and that common piece you can start discussing, and they can see, well, she's not that scary. She's not that scary. She may not look like me. She may not talk like me, but we both like the same thing. So let's see what else. Is more about what we have in common than what we have, of our differences.
I like that you mentioned a bunch of things you mentioned resonated, but I wanted to point out the building relationships is so very important. And when you're talking about subjects and you come into conversations, everyone brings biases to conversations, to the table at work. So when you're aware of your biases, it makes it more easy to have conversations about social injustices, racial injustices,
and we all have them.
diverse topics. Yes,
we
yes.
all have them. It doesn't make us bad people. We all have them.
There's a concept,
people and parties and just by the look of a person,
right?
They don't even have to open their mouths for you to have a preconceived notion of what they may be like.
Right. So to the question too, when we're talking about social injustices, Mrs. Aponte mentioned about the students. They come to school because they've heard things at home, on the television. They've been exposed to so many things. So deciphering what's fact and not factual is very difficult, even for adults. So Mrs. Ortiz mentioned something very important. Sometimes we just have to listen and then provide our students with resources. We have quite a few resources on our Polk County Schools webpage under the Equity Department. There are books, not only about racial injustices, but voter rights, women's rights. So there are resources out there, and my office is always available if you need that. But there's a lady by the name of Rudine Smith Bishop, and she talked about a concept called windows and mirrors. In order for our students to understand one another better, sometimes we have to remember that we need to give them opportunities to see mirrors themselves represented in a positive light or in our curriculum. And then also windows, being able to show them the life and the cultures of others so that they can be able to understand them better as well. And all of this information will allow our students to be better as community members and be able to have conversations about what is everyone's human right, what is fair in our society. So those are just some tidbits that I do share sometimes in my training. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on that topic from the panel?
I would like to speak on it.
Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Vaughn.
I think what's important is to be aware of what's happening so that like kind of like with some of the decisions that went down yesterday, that you might have some sensitivities today.
Absolutely.
And in the classroom, and I think it's important too to show, empathy and not sympathy. And there's a huge difference between the two.
Great.
So you want to, and I think any fact diving is something you have to avoid, because it's really not about, I think that's where people get caught up in what really happened or not is, and then you're debating facts. That's not what's important. What's important is how it's making that student feel.
Right.
How they feel. Are they being heard? Do they feel like they're being heard? Are they frustrated? Because, some of us share that same frustration. So listening is so important to listen to how they feel about it, and just let them know that you're there to support them.
Right. And I was doing a training today, and I was able to share with the group some assumptions about different groups. And one of the assumptions that I use for an example is that some might think one person from a certain background, like for example, someone from a certain race or ethnic background might be the only one that can speak on a topic about that race. There was a second example that talked about the fact that there's a misconception that European Americans do not have any opinion or information to share or can't engage in those conversations. So I'm glad to hear that everyone that have spoken so far feels comfortable having a conversation and engaging. So listening is very important. I heard that. Being empathetic and not sympathetic is also another good one, and connecting with your students. So thank you all for sharing those pieces. Is there anyone else before I move on from that topic? And there will be time later in the Q&A session to discuss it as well. The next topic is equitable access. So again, remember, equity is making sure that there's fairness there. So here's the question. What are some things that teachers can do to ensure equitable access to educational opportunities, such as accelerated programs, gifted classes, IB programs, accelerated coursework, etc.? So once again, what are some things, and not just teachers, schools can do to make sure that there's equitable access to educational opportunities such as accelerated programs and accelerated coursework?
In order to have equitable access, we discussed how we can have a student lottery to pull student names out of the bowl, or random sticks to call on them, just giving all the students a fair chance.
All right, so keeping your students engaged in class requires you to be equitable in calling upon them. That's a great strategy. Thank you, Ms. Jessica. And I think we have a guidance counselor on our panel, and I specifically asked her on too because I know her background is working in IB programs and magnet schools, and she's also worked at Bartow High School. And I always talk about the equitable access piece from my end, and I have to do a report every year in my office about what percentages of students and what demographic of students are in certain programs. So Ms. Jackson, I hate to call on you like that, but do you mind sharing some information on how we can ensure some equitable access to accelerated programs like at a high school level or a middle school level? Is Ms. Jackson still on?
She might be frozen, unfortunately.
She might be frozen, okay. So just really quickly, if she's frozen right now, I know counselors get reports of test scores, and those scores can be scanned for potentials for gifted programs or accelerated programs, and being in those accelerated programs are very important, and the seats are highly coveted because they set the students up for success when they go on to college or to get a scholarship. So it's very important to make sure that we're giving access, not to just those parents that's gonna come out and fuss and say, I want my child in this seat, but for our counselors or our teachers to recognize some hidden talent. And even in the elementary school level, if you see a student that might be on track for being successful that might be able to be successful in a gifted program, push the envelope and get that child tested so they can get access to those accelerated courses. Because again, it sets them up for even more success once they get into the upper grades and even in college. So elementary schools, so we can't leave them out as well. We want to make sure that those students are being caught early.
And really do use a lot of more data-based decision-making when it comes to that, more than even parent requests, because as you all know, we all think our kids are gifted. So every parent wants to believe their kid is gifted and deserves, one of these seats. And I really trust the data and all the testing and teacher observations to make sure we're providing the opportunity to as many people, not just a select few, or that the parents may be more vocal, but to make sure that even parents that wouldn't even think that their kid will qualify for a program, because that's a discussion I was having today with my leadership team. What we do in elementary, people may not think it's that serious, but we're setting that path for that child in middle school and in high school to make sure they have an opportunity to take advanced classes, to take electives. And if we don't get it right in elementary, elementary is the groundwork. To me, is ground zero. That's where we get them and we can start. And even kids that may not think that they have the potential, we see that little bit of potential and we just, push on, whether it's sports, whether it's art, whether it's not necessarily academics, but any area that we can tell them you have opportunities to do XYZ, we will push them. And I know most elementary principals do the same.
Thank you so much for that. I think I see Ms. Jackson back on.
Yes, I'm having internet connection trouble, so I lost you. I'm not sure if you asked me a specific question or not.
I did.
I just heard you say guidance counselor. So
yes, ma'am. I was mentioning that your background, you have a very broad view of how those opportunities in high schools can be accessed and sometimes missed. Do you mind sharing how we can make sure that students have equitable access to accelerated coursework and programs? I think she froze again.
Yes.
But she is my go-to sometimes because she's done so much in different schools. There she is.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's going on with my internet.
We got you.
But I guess the most important thing is, and just based on my experience from being at a traditional high school and then going to a magnet school, and basically I spent like my last 15 years or so in the magnet program. And one of the things that I have learned is that students in general adapt to their environment. So we can't just assume that they may not be the stellar student when it comes to test taking. So we can't just use that data to say because their test scores are not where it should be, that they are not, they don't have the skills for an accelerated class or to be an accelerated program. Because what I tell students even now is that that's just one component, because you can be the greatest test taker, but your work ethics are not that great. And so when it comes to AP classes, I look at all of that.
We lost her again. I'm sorry.
I look at I'm sorry. Did you lose me again?
We lost you, but you're back.
Okay. So it's just basically, I'm going to hurry up because I can go on and on. Basically, you just have to look at more than one component. And so we just can't assume that because a student may not have, as when you're using test scores like FSA scores, and a student may not have like a 5, but they may be a level 3, but they're a hard worker. You still have to give those students a chance and expose them to it, because most of the time they will adapt to their environment.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I love the fact that you mentioned about the exposure and them adapting. I'm very familiar with, and I want to make sure I say his name right, Vygotsky. He talks about that in his studies. Mm-hmm. He speaks on the fact that students take what they already know and pair it with what we expose them to build their capacity. So when you think about growth mindset, that's a perfect example of how she just mentioned. A student can grow intellectually based on their environment and what they're being exposed to. So actually putting students in a position to be exposed and get access is important as well. So thank you for speaking on that for us. All righty.
Sandra, can I jump in too real quick?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I would love what Felicia was talking about, because I know from a teacher standpoint, a lot of times we're relying on the data and everything. And so I have a friend of mine who actually works in Washington. She works in a really rural part of the state. And the majority of the students at her school are Latino students. But in her gifted class that she teaches, its majority are white students. And so she was saying how, how can this be that only the students that are Caucasian are the ones that are in this class? And so she was able to look at different things in the testing that was being done and realizing that maybe just because the student doesn't fully have a grasp on the language doesn't mean that they don't think in a gifted and talented way. And how many times have students maybe been denied this opportunity that then impacts the projection of their life because they weren't given this opportunity based on our assumptions. So I really appreciate Ms. Jackson being able to talk about that. And from a teacher perspective, because we have a lot of teachers watching too, it can even just come down to what biases and what perceptions do I have that are maybe making me think, oh, the student can't handle this, when they probably can. It's just the language as a barrier, not necessarily the intellectual abilities.
Thank you for sharing that, Jessica. You hit the nail on the head there. I've been, like I mentioned, we do an equity report in our district and that data is tracked. So I did work with some of the departments this year with developing some different strategies, because we have goals and we try to reach those goals, but doing some different things which are strategies to increase some of those numbers in those programs is very important. And it starts with you guys, the teachers too. So we need your help in identifying those students that have potential to be a part of those programs. So thank you again for answering those for me. The last and final question relates to your classroom environment and the climate of your classroom. And again, I like to not just talk about the classroom, even though I'm talking to teachers, or your school. So here's the question. How might these terms and situations show up in your setting? And then how can you address them? So I have about 4 terms that I'm asking about. And once again, how might these terms or situations show up in your setting? And then how will you address them? So the first term is implicit biases. And remember that these are unintentional biases that we have that are displayed in the unconscious realm, but it impacts others so detrimentally. So can someone answer that one for me? How might it show up in your classroom and how will you address it? Or your school? Your microphone is off, Wanda.
This is Chantel. I was wondering if I can speak real quick on that.
Yes, you may, Chantel.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I am a LEA at Purcell Elementary. I've been in this position for 4 years. And prior to that, I taught at Lake Alfred, Adair Middle School. I taught 8th grade math, 7th and 8th grade math. But I think you said we're talking about intentional biases or unintentional biases.
They're implicit, yeah, or implied, and they're unconscious is the same, is another way of saying it. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So one of the things that I've noticed, because I work with the ESE department, is that some students, each student has different needs. And we have one kid in particular, this is a very busy kid, active, probably ADHD. And certain teachers have a harder time working with students who have like greater needs. And so one of the things I really hate to see, and it's unintentional, the teachers are just frustrated. They don't know how to handle the situation with the kids, but they will like form this picture of the child and talk about the kid negatively to other teachers. So the next year, when a new teacher gets him, they're like, oh my God, this kid is gonna be like the worst kid ever. What am I gonna do? Why did they put him in my classroom and whatever? This particular year, this student got a teacher that was pretty new. Like she was a 2nd-year teacher and she is an excellent teacher. She's excited about learning. She's excited about teaching the kids. And she said, I listened to the other teachers from last year and I felt so bad because they had all this negative stuff to say about this kid, but he is a really good kid. He is very active. And so she had so many strategies that she put into place. And when I talked to the mother, and obviously the parents don't know, what the teachers are saying about the student, but the first thing the mom said is, I am so glad he has this new teacher, because she calls her all the time and gives her compliments on how well he's doing in class and just talks to her about what they need to work on. So sometimes a kid may not be compatible with your personality, or your frustration level may be high depending on whatever else is going on in your life. But teachers have to form their own opinion about the students they get. And then you also have to have a reset so that these kids are not intentionally being this way. And we just have to learn how to put accommodations and structures in place to help them to be successful. So I think that's maybe what you were talking about. I'm not sure.
That is a perfect example of that. Thank you, Ms. Chantel. And my background is ESE. I've taught it and worked at a school for ESE students, a separate day school. And that is so very important to do that reset. And there is a bias, whether we're intentional about it or not, that some of our students that are in special programs may not have the capacity or the ability to do certain things. So thank you so much for sharing that example. Anyone else on that term? So the next term is microaggression. And microaggressions, once again, is defined as everyday commonplace slights or snubs against someone from a specific group. It could be a racial group. It could be a group of LGBTQ students. It could be a group of students from a single family home. So any common day or commonplace slights or snubs that are put upon any group based on their membership in a group from someone, and it's usually unintentional. So that was a mouthful, but what if how could that show up in your classroom or in your setting, and how would you address it if there are microaggressions?
I don't know if this would relate to that question, but something that I thought about and that I see often, and it's more so on the high school level, and it's how teachers sometimes are not willing. We have several students that they prefer to be addressed by certain pronouns, or they may have a different name that they would like to be addressed by. And a lot of teachers, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are teachers that are dead set against that. And I think they don't realize by refusing to do that, that is somewhat of a bias, because they are not, I think unconsciously, they are not supporting that child's decision. And sometimes it's the parent awareness, and the teachers are still reluctant to do it or acknowledge it. And I have found that people from a Christian background, and I speak on that because I am from a Christian background, but I also know that I have to remain neutral and lay whatever I feel, however I may think about the situation. I have to put that aside and just be there to support that student. Although I may not agree with their decision, it's not my place to tell them whether they are right or wrong. And if they want to be called Max and their name may be Maxine, who am I to say I'm not going to do that? And so I think sometimes we just need to be more sensitive to that and acknowledge that and be respectful of whatever pronouns or however that student want to be addressed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson, for that. My office also handles complaints of discrimination. That's actually a protected class. So we got to be careful about that too, even just speaking in general about it. But if it occurs and a complaint comes to the district, we have to address those. So we just have to be careful. But you said something very important, Ms. Jackson, being sensitive to all of our students, no matter what their background or how they identify, is very important. But when you get more into the microaggressions too, I have a very nice, I want to send it out to Jessica. Maybe she can send it to you. I have a video. It's about 18 minutes long, but it was a group of students individually got a chance to speak from the heart and talk about how microaggressions were put upon them by teachers in the classroom or other students. And it's so powerful because that's a term that we don't hear a lot and we don't know about. I didn't know about it until I started looking into it more about what that looks like. For example, maybe a female student feeling like her answer is scrutinized a little more because she's a female and she's not. So it's being questioned because there's a belief, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that the girl or the female student may not be as good at math. Or another one might be, I want this Asian student on my team or to handle this piece of the curriculum because Asians are good at math. Those are others. That's another example of commonplace snubs or negative comments toward a group or someone in a specific group. So again, the term is fairly new, but that video footage is very powerful, and I do plan to send that to Jessica to share with the group. I think you get a better idea of what that looks like in the classroom when it happens to students. And then when you think of the community or out in the community or in the workplace, same thing. Asking a woman, how did you get this position? Or how did you get here? Or how did you get that house? Those are examples of snubs. Thinking that someone is less of or unconsciously making a negative comment about someone. So thank you for that. Anybody else want to speak on that topic?
Yes, I've experienced microaggressions at the job as the principal. I have been standing with my male assistant principal, and automatically, because he's the male, people automatically assume he's the principal. I've had it happen when I had my white assistant principal and my black assistant principal and the three of us, and they would address her before, and then she would say, I'm not the principal. They would then address him. It's like that automatic.
Perfect example.
He cannot be in charge. And I got it from a student when I first became AP, and that's when I started realizing, oh my God, I never really thought of it as anything harmful. But when he told me, he was one of our students that used to be, those challenging ones, frequent flyers. I did discipline, so he always, was the one in my office. In high school, he came back to the school and he was telling me, oh my God, you're here in the office, blah, 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 blah. And he was so excited. And I said, yes, I'm the principal now. He says, you're the principal? I said, why would you think I'd be here? I thought you were secretary.
Very good examples.
In his educational career, seen a person that looks like him in charge of a school.
Right.
So little things like that you don't really think about, they happen. And of course, now they have a word for it, the microaggression. And we do it to other people.
Right.
Oh, you must like tacos, or do you know how to make, stuff like that you would think, oh, haha, that's just so funny, but we have to be a little bit more aware of things like that.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And as educators, if we see something like that happen or hear it, we have to address it immediately, because that's the only way that students are going to learn that it's not acceptable. So I will be sure that I send out that video. But Ms. Wanda, those are very good examples. Even age, I've heard someone recently say, that little young person's not going to tell me what to do, or that young person can't be my boss. So those are situations like that for in the community or in the workplace. But specifically for students, I would love for y'all to hear that video from a student's point of view. All right, and the final terms are being culturally sensitive or culturally competent when you're dealing with planning your curriculum. So how would this show up in your setting maybe? And how might you address making sure that your curriculum is culturally sensitive and that you're practicing cultural competence? Anybody want to answer that one?
Okay, yes, I want to answer it.
Thank you.
So when I was teaching math, and when we have certain word problems that we would do, I thought that some of the students just didn't understand the math concept or the algorithm involved. But what I realized is that some students had never been on an airplane. Some students, it was just certain concepts that they just didn't know about, or sometimes there are language barriers, because when you are teaching in a class where you have English language learners, you have to have more like pictures, more, you have to be more expressive. So when you're talking, you're demonstrating what you need. So it's more of a communication problem, and it's more of just students just not being exposed to everything. So, and because we don't have a lot of field trips and we can't expose students to everything, we do have YouTube. We have programs like Brain Pop that can give kids a brief idea about something, or when you're talking about the concept, you might just kind of ask to check to see how many people have ever been on an airplane before, or how many people, whatever concept that a kid may not have been exposed to. And then when you realize it's only a few or whatever, just kind of talk about it and have other students share. So now when you go back to the math word problem that involves travel with airplanes, the concept makes more sense. And so you realize they don't have a problem with the math or following an algorithm. They have as a language barrier, or it's just them not being exposed to certain concepts yet,
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, go
Can you
ahead.
hear me?
Chandra's saying
I can't
yes.
hear you.
Yes, I was trying to unmute my mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was, I'm sorry first of all for being late, but I got stuck at school and my trip home is over an hour. So I did the best I could. I was doing something in Reading Wonders. I teach ESE, third, fourth, and fifth grades. And there was something about Elijah McCoy and his family apparently left the South and traveled to Ontario via the Underground Railroad. And I was born and raised in Harlem. I heard about the Underground Railroad and Mary McLeod Bethune and Harriet Tubman and all that. But all my students are Hispanic, and I wondered if they'd heard of any of this, and they had not. And so I changed my talk to educate them about what Blacks went through in the South in the 1800s, and just trying to. I realized that that's not something they'd be aware of, and so I asked.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. Outlaw. And a lot of times we can plan all day long, but some things pop up in class, and having a teachable moment may take only a few minutes, but taking that time to help them understand, because someone from New York may think the subways are underground railroads, when really that's not what the topic means. So thank you so much for sharing that. And in Reading Wonders, I will compliment that series, because they do have a lot of culturally competent thinking in terms of bringing stories in that might reflect students from different backgrounds. And it's not just race and culture either. So sometimes having stories about grandmothers raising their children, or having double family homes. So thank you so much for sharing that. And those are opportunities to be culturally sensitive and competent in your classroom. Anyone else?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Thomas.
Yes, I've been listening to you guys, and a lot of that stuff hit home. I worked as a counselor with juveniles. I worked with counselors with veterans, and that was one of the biggest things we ran into, was a lot of this that you're speaking of. But one of the critical ways we handled it is, you guys all aware with removing barriers and that type of thing. But instead of focusing directly at the students, we focused on the instructors and the counselors, and it was about moving their barriers. And that's part of what we have to do in order to be able to realize what each of these students, their biggest capabilities.
I will agree with you. Thank you so much. And it's important to note that it's important to do it with not just students, but adults. And we do have some teachers that teach adults. So we still have our adult education programs. So thank you for sharing that, Thomas. Anybody else want to speak on any of those topics? All right. I did send some resources over to Mallory that she'll send out. And a few of you have inboxed me too. I'll make sure I send those directly. But there are so many resources out there to tap into online. I've kind of tried to vet the ones that I am mentioning now. Something like you said, I think Wanda said earlier, there's so many things out there. So sometimes you just kind of got to look through them. But we have 30 ways to be culturally competent or culturally sensitive that I sent over to her. 5 ways to create a culturally sensitive classroom. Using equity audits in your classroom. That's a huge one. There's a book out about equity audits for schools and classrooms. And really quick, I got to tell you about this. There's a simple activity for doing an equity audit in your classroom. Draw 3 circles on your paper, kind of like how a jawbreaker is made with the layers. So you draw a small circle in the center, a circle on the outside of that circle, and then a third circle on the third layer. And the concept is to write all the students that are easy to reach in that center circle. And then on the second layer of circle, you write down all the names of the students that are a little difficult to reach, but you can still get through to them. And then on the outer circle, you write all those outliers, those students that just you cannot get to, or they can't seem to rein them in behaviorally or academically. And then write down some goals. Be honest with yourself and recognize and be self-reflective too. Write down some goals on how you can get those students inside that inner circle. That's a great, simple way to do an equity audit in your classroom and to make sure that you're reaching all of your students. So that book is available, and I sent over the title and the author for that. There's a potato activity. It's a video about how you can teach diversity with students with a bag of potatoes. That's an interesting one. Adults love it. Your children will love it too. There's some video clips on microaggression, like I mentioned. And finally, our website right now, it's still up for now, but the superintendent put out a video on social injustices, and that's still out there, and some resources are also out there on how to have these conversations with students. And finally, there's a Sesame Street video that Elmo and his dad was having a conversation about social injustices and how the riots are happening and trying to explain it in kid-friendly language. I'll also be sending that over to you. So those are just a few resources, but I'm always available, Office of Equity and Diversity for Polk County Schools. If you are seeking any additional information or resources, please feel free to reach out to me. So I think I'm done, Jessica. I'm gonna turn it back over to you. Or Mallory.
Thank you so much. Mallory's going to jump in and she's going to take us over with the Q&A. That was absolutely fantastic. And I love the diverse conversation that we had.
Yes, one thing that we are going to remind you of, we kind of dropped it in the chat a little bit at the same time, but we are going to provide these amazing resources that Chandra gave to us. She talked throughout the panel about these resources, and I promise I have that microaggression video that I kind of like watched sporadically, some of these resources, and they are phenomenal. I learned a ton from them, so I highly encourage you to take a look at them. I'll provide them tonight right before we leave, and then as well in the follow-up email, okay? So I'm gonna go over a couple things for our Q&A. This is a great opportunity if you are wanting to ask a question, or you've been thinking about something that necessarily applies to your classroom. It's a great chance to ask that question. And so I'm going to give you a couple guidelines that will help us out as well as keep things going. One of the things that when we do a Zoom that can be incredibly helpful with questions, you have to pause and wait till someone addresses a question, is the hand raising button. So this is a button that is provided by Zoom where if you have in the chat section, it will give you an opportunity to kind of like click that raise your hand button. You'll have your hand raised for us and we'll kind of see that. And then when you are done asking that question, or if we grab your question, you can kind of like put your hand down or somebody will address that question. Another thing is that one panelist is going to address the question. I know that it's often great to get multiple perspectives, but due to time, we want to be respectful of that. So if you have a particular question and you want to address it to one of our panelists, or one of our panelists will be the one speaking up and answering that question. We also, for you as a panelist, for our panelists, anytime you're addressing a question, we highly encourage you to attach a story or a particular scenario that's taken place in your classroom. There's so much value in stories. This is one of the things that I really admired going through teacher engagement events with Tamika and Jessica. They do a phenomenal job at telling stories, and stories can help you remember the content a little bit more than if we just kind of give a statement or a definition. So they can be just as powerful. So as a panelist, I encourage you to attach a story or a personal experience with your answer. And then you can drop the question in the chat, or you can, like I said, raise your hand either physically on video or click on that raising hand option on Zoom, and then we will be sure to answer as many as possible. But Chandra, we had a couple asked in the chat while you guys are talking about these particular questions that you had earlier. So I'm going to address them. Anybody on the panel can answer these questions. It's not just for Chandra. Claire Alfred Rose, who is at Stambaugh Middle, actually asked this question. What steps can a teacher take to create a safe space for students? So if any one of you panelists want to take that, Jessica, you want to go ahead and address that for us?
Yes, some steps that I would take to create a safe environment is just to ensure that all students know the rules and they're clear in regards to how people should be treated. just treating everyone equally and fairly, avoiding stereotypes and examples in your resources, actively promoting multiculturalism in lessons, planning lessons that include diversity in your classroom, having the books that reflect everyone with diversity, using a variety of teaching methods. And like mentioned before by Chantel, just the assessment questions. If you understand, they don't understand a concept or a question, then break it down to make sure they understand what is actually being asked and not just misunderstanding a word that they're not familiar with. Using diverse images and PowerPoints and presentations, I think will actually help in your classroom as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. I think I'll have you come join me and do some training sometime. Did I mention that she's a rattler? Did I mention that she's a rattler? So,
right,
also creating safe spaces really quick. Yeah. It's always a good practice to have group norms posted in your classroom, and they may switch based on what you're doing in your classroom. When I do trainings, even with adults, I do group norms, and pretty much we're talking about how we're going to make sure we're respectful and be professional as we're spending our time together. So group norms is another great.
Thank you so much for sharing for the both of you guys. I know that one thing when I was in the classroom last year, I mean, I've been in the classroom for 10 years, not just last year, but I think it was always a great practice to stop and look at your lesson before presenting it, making sure you don't have some of those bias, or making sure you do have a wide variety of literature across the grade level. One thing I really loved was my classroom library, and making sure that I had authors from, you know, different backgrounds and different type of stories being told. And so I really resonated with that, Jessica. So I appreciate you sharing that aspect about the books in your library, or having access to that in your lessons as well. All right, our next question comes from Emily. What is a good way to allow these conversations and still avoid conflicts between students in the classroom? And this is directed more towards a secondary level high school students. So how can we have these safe conversations without having this huge blow up or these conflicts arise within the classroom? So anybody from our panel who wants to address that?
Well, I have taught high school before, and I know they can be very large and aggressive. I was 21 when I taught high school, so it was very intimidating. But to keep those things down, again, you set up a situation where you have group norms, and you let them participate in setting those group norms so that they'll all agree to live by those whatever you put on the paper, being respectful to one another, challenge ideas in thinking and not people. That's a huge one. And that'll kind of set the tone to let them know, hey, we're not here to fight one another. We're here to have some intellectual dialogue on some topics that might be sensitive. But we're here to understand and work with one another. And I think students will get a lot and gain a lot from that. And talk to them about the fact that you're going to become an adult one day working in a diverse setting at your job. So you're just getting practice. So again, just setting some group norms and letting them help you come up with those, so that you might be able to have a good conversation without anyone getting mad or throwing blows. Okay. I think I'm gonna talk. Do I need to talk a little more? Are y'all working on something?
No, you're good. I saw Mallory just got up. So that's
I was like, Tamika totally changed.
I know, that's right. That's right. So those have been great questions, and I think we're good with the questions that we have right now. So what we will go ahead, I don't know if maybe Mallory got kicked off or froze or something, so that's probably why the screen changed.
Someone put something about, I'm sorry.
I don't know, go ahead.
No, someone put something in the chat box about Harmony, and I forgot about that and didn't mention it. Wow, what a wonderful program, and having those morning chats. I can't see who put it down there now because I kind of.
Yeah, we got it from Katie Surrency. Sanford Harmony has free account access for teachers that have social emotional learning resources and lessons.
Yes, I've seen that in action, and it's a great program. So thank you for sharing that, Ms. Surrency.
Awesome, awesome. Well, ladies, we have so appreciated your insight, and kudos to the participants who've been able to jump in and be able to give some insights as well. It's been really awesome conversations and so many great ideas. The chat has been blowing up the entire conversation, which has been fantastic. We're going to definitely save it, hold on to it, and learn from the chat. We do want to make sure that you know that you can get in-service points for this. If you are on a professional certificate, you know that you need 120 points to renew your certificate every year. So if you're on a professional certificate and you want to get some in-service points for this, we encourage you to do the follow-up activity. Or if you really even understand that, and this is a great seminar, it's a great session. However, if you don't actually do anything with what you've learned, the chances of you actually being able to implement it and have it last long-term are so small, literally like 2% chance that it will stick. So you have to have a follow-up piece if you really want this to take effect in the way that it should. So we have a few ideas for you for implementation activities that you can use to be able to take this and make it last long term. So one is being able to put a lesson plan together where you're able to share with your students some of the perspectives that you've learned today. Chandra mentioned that potato activity. That's another option that you have there. And then we also have some really great resources. One being, I recommend it to everybody to read, is The Opportunity Myth, published by TNTP. And that is really, really powerful when it comes to seeing the actual research that shows that although we have so many students that are not graduating high school or are not seeking other opportunities that could have been available to them, sometimes we say, oh, well, maybe they didn't want it. Maybe that wasn't on the cards for them. But it's not necessarily that they didn't want to do that. It's actually more on the fact that they didn't get the opportunity to have it, because educators like us have actually let our perceptions get in the way to stop that from happening. And so it actually shows the research showing that students of color are traditionally getting lower level work than their white counterparts. And the data is just absolutely astounding. So we gave you the basically like the executive summary, kind of the synopsis, because it's a very large publication, but it's also interactive. So I'd recommend reading the whole thing. But we'll go ahead and send you just the snippet of it. And so you can do a book study with some of your colleagues, or an article study, really. Get some colleagues together, have them all read it, and then just discuss it, even if it's just you and one other teacher. It's powerful when you get to see that there are other people on your campus who are willing to take charge just like you. So you've got 3 options there that you can go ahead and go from. I see that it's coming back on the screen, the implementation activity. Good, I got it right. I was like, I'm just going from memory, but I think I've got it. So you got your lesson plan where you implement an element of equity and reflection. You have this potato activity and the article reflection, and we're gonna send you all of that stuff in a follow-up email tomorrow. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. So if you're on a professional certificate, you can get those points, and we'd recommend you do it just anyway, so that this really sets in and can have a long-term effect. Also, we have these new teacher seminars every single month. They'll all be online, just like this. You can just have it playing if you want while you're cooking dinner and listening to it, or you can actually get really engaged, show your video like many of you did tonight. But we want to see how we did, and we want to make sure that if there's things we change, we can change it. So you have a QR code, and you also have a link that you can go ahead and fill out the survey. We'd appreciate your feedback. Next month, when we do our virtual new teacher seminar, it's going to be on online learning. So we have the InTech team coming up. They're going to share some ideas, but next time we'll also do breakouts. So in the breakouts, we're going to feature a classroom teacher, traditional like in-person classroom teacher doing using instructional technology. We also will have an e-learning teacher and get some advice from them. And then we'll also have a blended learning teacher. So you'll get a perspective from each person, and you'll get to actually hear from those teachers that are in the classroom right now, experiencing the same challenges that you are, with really getting to see how do we adapt what we're doing given our situation right now with COVID. So make sure you sign up for that one. It'll be really exciting and some really great information for you. I think in the chat, I saw something about, can you send the feedback link and QR code email? We sure will, Katie. We'll do that for sure. All right, and Mallory, are you back? Did you want to say anything before we sign off?
So sorry, my computer literally just shut off. So went completely blank. It's one of those things that I feel like is a blessing with technology at times. You learn to be flexible. So I'm really appreciative that Tamika is with me as well as Jessica jumping right in. So I apologize for that. But yes, I'm currently trying to get access to those equity resources, but I'm so incredibly thankful for our panelists and Chandra for leading this. I think this is something that even myself, I needed to hear and hear a refresher on that. So I'm glad that you guys decided to spend your afternoon, as well as our participants. Thank you for working an incredibly long day of work and then joining us and being engaged in this conversation. So I'm grateful for that. And I will plug in our resources really quick before we go, as well as Jessica has dropped in the chat any kind of communication that you need with Chandra or teacher engagement. You can access that at our email or find us on the hub. We are looking forward to our seminar coming up, the second one, October 15th. And so you can go ahead and register for that and be on the lookout for those flyers as well.
Thanks, Mallory. Before you sign off, we want to also plug in the podcast that's coming out next week. If you were really tuned into this, you are absolutely going to love our very first podcast episode. It's with Amber Screen, a teacher at Philip O'Brien, and she is talking about the impact that empathy can have on campus, not just with your students, but with their families and with other colleagues. Somebody mentioned earlier about empathy being different than sympathy, and it is absolutely powerful. She's one of those people you can just sit and listen to forever. So make sure you tune in for that. You can find it on the hub, but it'll also be available on Apple Podcast. Make sure that it's on Google Play, YouTube, it'll be everywhere. It's got video and audio components. So it's a great thing to listen to on the way to work. Or again, I just keep going back to cooking dinner because apparently that's what I do, just listen to things while cooking dinner. So thank you for joining us. Our team, thanks. You got Tamika, Mallory, and I here. And then let's give a huge round of applause to our awesome panel. Ladies, we so appreciate you giving your time and sharing your experiences. It's really made a difference to get to see from all perspectives how different your experiences have been and how it can impact us positively. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, if you missed the beginning part or you want to share with a friend, know that it's on social media. And you can always follow us at Teach Engage PCPS. We will see you soon. Bye.